All right, good evening, everybody at home. This is December 9th. It is a work session tonight, and we have a big crowd, wonderful, wonderful-looking people tonight, and all of you wonderful people at home. We have first proclamations for retirement for Darren Grimshaw and Sharon Stonehouse. Great workers they've been for the city. We'll also be doing Mayor's Awards and recognition of myself and Annie. That's what they do for you when they kick you out, so that's what's going on. Now, we're going to move to some discussion items to get some things taken care of, and then we'll go to the agenda items. Discussion item number one, we'll just start with Mr. Lee O. with integrated plan.
Okay.
Were you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
You go to the, oh, you can just, thank you. Okay, Leo Foley, Veenstrom Kim. The wastewater and stormwater integrated management plan. This was submitted in October. Integrated management plans in the state of Iowa are a little bit unique. The state of Iowa has never approved a stormwater and a sanitary and integrated plan. They've done stormwater ones and they've done sanitary, but they've never done the two together. It's becoming huge in the whole country. Everybody's wanting to go this direction, and Iowa's on board with this. They're part of the team, as well as the US EPA. US EPA helped you in the stormwater arena. Now we've married the two together. So kind of the overarching goals. This is kind of big picture type things. It gets down to little details, but these big pictures are very important. Water quality becomes the number one issue, not anything else. Water quality and improving, maintaining water quality to regulatory standards. Incorporate innovative techniques, community input. And number two, balance the Clean Water Act requirements in a manner prioritizing the most pressing public health and environmental public issues. So that's kind of the backbone of what we're doing. The next one down talks about the actionable items. Reduce nitrogen and phosphorus. That's big in the state of Iowa, and that has to do with the zone down in the Gulf of Mexico, the dead zone they call it. So Iowa has some really stringent regulations. But what they're saying is they should be based on what are the most important things. Is that water quality more important than your lift station being flooded out and not doing? So those are the kind of balancing things that we're looking at doing. Federal guidance. The integrated stormwater and wastewater planning, EPA has a guidance book. 2012 came out. Number two, the second one, it will allow the cities to prioritize infrastructure investments to achieve broader environmental goals in a phased financial schedule that is achievable to all citizens and business, and map out the milestones for reassessment. That's what you're all about. You're trying to get a phased approach. To say we're not looking at separating your sewers would not be the right statement. The statement is we are trying to get to separated sewers, but we have to do it in a phased manner, and there's only so many dollars to go around, and what's the smartest way to get there? So if money was no option, we'd be doing sewer separation everywhere right now today. What we're saying is if we did that, we wouldn't be doing flood protection. We wouldn't be doing a lot of other projects that the city needs to do. And if you look at the unemployment rates and you look at this, the city can't just raise rates tremendously. They're not the fastest growing city. We're not a city that has a tremendous amount of resources at this time. So there's a whole chapter on this. And to be honest, the DNR helped us with that chapter. They're like, bring in your bonding rates. Tell us how much bonding capacity you have. And so all those things are helping. And there's a whole chapter. This book's about that thick. And there's a whole chapter on why Burlington doesn't have the financial capabilities to do everything. So the other thing is you have to also, this is a document that has very specific projects in it with dollars. But what we say is those dollars And those projects change quickly based on, did we get grants for something? If we got grants for something, and I'll give you an example later. I know Nick's working on the roads project, roads budget. He'll be up behind me. That roads budget ties into where should we be doing projects and why. And there's specific ways to address projects. And that's what we're putting together, this team that every year will review the projects and revise them. Down to nitty-gritty details. I don't need you to see all the numbers because all the numbers are, sorry about that. I was just trying to tell you. There's 10 pages of these projects going out 20 years. Going out 20 years. We do not intend to do every project the way we are, but we had to show how we were doing projects and how they all fit in. Nutrient management, for instance. You have a permit that says you need to be doing a nutrient project for $6 million. Is that about right? $6 million. Need to do it next 5 years. We're saying we don't think that's a top priority. Maybe you can move that out. So what we said in 5 years, we'll do a restudy to see if that is a highest priority. Right now, they've agreed to that. That was an agreement that the DNR has given us verbally. Let me get to you a little further because we're not to the page where everybody's signing on the dotted line. The next one down, I just wanted you to see, we're committing to $118 million worth of work in a 21-year period. And that means that's work that's between the Howard R. Green study and the roads plan and the flood protections works, that's in your budget. That's there. So that will be showing up for you. We're trying to show DNR it's in there. Jim and others are saying, well, it may not be in there at the rate we're showing because of the financial planners might want to move things back and forth. That's okay. We do this all the time. But to say that you're going to move it out of the budget, we have to be careful. Next thing is this ranking system. I just got a comment this morning that they wanted us, this is a ranking system we did, and the reason the project showed up on those tables the way they did is because we rank them, score them, and then with that scoring system, each project has a score, and it came out in the way we showed it. And part of that is this scoring system. The last one is really hard to see down here at the bottom. But if you see that, apply resources. The last one says leverage other funding sources right there. We think that's high because if you can get other funding sources and you're gonna, oops, sorry about this. I thought I had that shut off. If you think you're gonna do projects and you get other money to do a roads project, well, you might want to use that funding to help do a sewer separation project. And I've got an example. This next one we're working on now. Again, I'm not up here telling you this is what we're doing. I'm saying this is the things we're looking at. This is South Main Street, and we're looking again at what things could be done that might be smart while that is being torn up. And we're saying, okay, what if we wanted to put another force main in? Is there room to do that? Is there room to put a lift station at some time that would take some of the relief off? And by the way, can we separate this whole part? So maybe these neighborhoods up here aren't separated yet, but once you separate them, then this is all separated below for a reasonable cost, very reasonable. So we've presented that to Nick and I think Jim, and they're looking at their budgets and saying that looks like maybe a smart move and maybe we can get that into the budget. To me, that's integrated planning at its best. That's trying to be smart, and now that project moves up. Another project probably has to move back. Which project moves back? Every year we decide, we send it into the DNR. We've done this in a very informal manner with Davenport for the last 10 years. It's worked really well. You get DNR on your team, and before long, they know the problems you're gonna have. And as long as they think you're doing this kind of stuff and making good strides, I think we've won a lot of battles with them. So what are the next steps? The next step's a real important one. Defined administrative order. They're gonna want an order. Jesse, your city engineer and others have been getting you amendments that extend it out a year, 2 years or something. We want to get a defined administrative order, and you've got an attorney that's working on this for you right now, that bases everything on this integrated plan. And we know we have the DNR staff level people in agreement, and we've got the US EPA in agreement. So the attorneys need to come along. With the attorneys, you get a few little more, they want a few more specifics. They're gonna want hard dates on certain things, not everything, but for instance, they're gonna wanna know completed milestones. One we could probably give them. When are you gonna complete doing the upstream and downstream tie-off of the flood protection that will help protect the lift station? We know we're gonna do that, so we'll try to give them a hard date on that. When are you gonna do the Locust Basin? You know you're gonna do that, you give them a hard date. You give them some hard dates, we keep other things flexible. For instance, check-in dates. I'm gonna kill it.
Sorry, man, I gotta quit doing that to your phone.
This is a phone of about 3 days. That's one of my problems. You've got to be kidding. Okay. Check-in dates with the DNR. We're going to have those. When can we check in? How often do we check in? What do we do during those check-ins? That'll all be part of that administrative order. They're going to want to know status of flow reductions. That's always a really difficult one to get over. How is your green infrastructure working? How is it working? So there's all kinds of things. If we do green infrastructure, for instance, on Jefferson Street, we'll be able to show tremendous reductions in flows. That's really what they're looking for. And we can do it by, a lot of that kind of stuff, we can do it by engineering analysis. We're also putting in flow meters, trying to figure out, because we really need to know, when are your CSOs? When are you actually having overflows? How much is actually going there? So that stuff's being worked. Big deal is future steps to achieve separation. Yes, we need to keep working at it. We need to keep going. I put greater than 40 years because that's what we're pushing for. That we don't see it being 100% separated for 40 years. It's not going to be in 2 years or 5 years like they thought it was going to be. And this is a document to get it nailed down. City of Des Moines has the exact same plan, almost to a T. City of Davenport is a separated city, but they're after Davenport is they don't want any more overflows because Davenport's separated, but they have tremendous overflows where they're pumping into the river constantly because their sewer system can't take it. So now they're trying to get them on that, and they're doing the same thing. They're trying to get trying to make it all. So everything you're doing is exactly what they want to do. I think we've already won a lot of big battles with them as far as timing and when things are going to go. The administrative order is not done, and that's still another big step that probably over the next 6 months will be occurring. With that, I didn't know if I'd missed anything, Jim, or...
No, I guess the biggest thing to take away from this is the consent order work that was listed,
19 million.
119 million with engineering that was supposed to be done by 2023. We're not.
You're talking about sewer
I'm
separation.
sorry. The current consent order.
Current consent order, yes.
That work, instead of doing that over the next 3.5 years, we're talking about trying to spread out
40 years.
In over 40 years, and the majority of the work that was on that next 3.5 years we're not doing in the first 10.
Right.
We're focusing on the other goals that we look at as being more important for the overall infrastructure, and working in the CSO work where we can and where it makes the most sense.
And our documents that we've given them, they didn't just bless them. They came back to us 2 or 3 times with, we don't like this, we don't like that, change all of this. For instance, the whole system of how we select projects, they changed. So to me, that's a good thing, because they're buying in to where we're going. They're buying into how we're getting there.
But it's also still very expensive. I think it was through 2030, I think it was about 50 million
Yeah.
of work that needs done. And we cannot afford that with our sewer rates. A lot of that is TIF backed. Some of it is GO backed. It's an overwhelming amount of work. So they're willing to work with us on a schedule, but they're not willing to not hold our feet to the fire.
The other thing is your sewer rates right now, I guess as a council, you've done a good job. You've kept your sewer rates very low. That doesn't help you in the long run. What we've showed them is you're gonna continue to increase your sewer rates 3%, 10%, and we've showed it. For the next 5 years, and from there out, you'll probably have to continue. They're not gonna let up on, if you're not increasing your sewer rates, they'll start to come down harder.
I have just a quick question. So is this gonna become the norm for most communities like ours? And the reason I asked that, so I looked at, Jim sent this out in an email a couple weeks ago, and I went through it pretty thoroughly. I looked at the sewer master plan, and I looked at the stuff that was presented, and kind of, just over the last 6-8 months, all the different studies that we've had done, those presentations. These are all projects that have a lifespan of probably 50 years, maybe even a little longer than that, and then we're back redoing that project again. These aren't things that are gonna go away. Are we gonna, as a city, should we get used to the idea that we are gonna start to consistently see these rate increases into perpetuity and these types of projects?
Unless something changes dramatically, I don't see sewer rates going up. Every single community I'm working with is doing the exact same thing you are. Most of them even more. I see rates going up very fast, especially in the sewer department, much more than in the water even. And so I don't see it, I don't think you're gonna be able to say we're gonna stop. Now, you might get to a certain point and be able to slow down.
Well, but you said, 2039 was the plan that you put up there. There's $117 million in projects.
We have a list that goes out through 2065.
That's right.
And that's taking care of things that we can think of now, let alone the things that are coming up for
And the
big
last
needs.
page I have on there, future steps to achieve separation, greater than 40 years.
Right.
You're not gonna be separated at the way this plan's working in 40 years.
And in 2065, a project that is $3 million today is gonna cost $12 million next.
Right.
So,
No, right now, it's a very tough business, unless they come up with some kind of a huge grant program. The only thing I see right now is the state revolving fund loan. Sometimes they come with forgivable loans and things like that, but they usually are sporadic. You'll get a couple of years of that, or something like that.
I still don't see how, I can't see them not making adjustments. And again, I'm just saying
I agree.
with every community getting hit this hard, there's just no way.
They had a,
Mayor, but regardless of whether there's adjustments made, the work still needs to be done.
Right on.
And, I mean, it's just,
that's
it's
not
just,
going
it's
away.
just a matter of the world we live in today.
US EPA had kind of brought a bunch of cities in to talk about this, rates and how fast they're going. And the cities were Chicago, New Orleans, these big cities. And somehow Ottumwa, Iowa shows up. And we showed up with them. And Ottumwa was to represent the small cities. And what's funny is your numbers, oh my Lord, I can't get it shut off.
Would you call your wife back?
Leo, at some point, this is gonna cost you, all right?
All right, that's it.
There's a coffee fund.
I keep
that needs to
pressing
be
it
replenished.
down and it says off. Okay. Ottumwa, Iowa's numbers look tiny compared to some of these big cities and all that. But then when you start saying how much revenue per person, it can be even higher. And they brought that up. By the way, Burlington, Iowa came up at the meeting because they said, well, Burlington in the state of Iowa is doing an integrated plan. So they knew from all of our coordination with there, they knew about that. But what we were trying to prove to them with Ottumwa is the problems are maybe even worse in the small towns than they are in the large towns. The numbers don't look as bad if you just look at the number, but numbers per person and how fast rates are having to go up, it's tough. I think integrated planning is the only way to go. I don't think there's an out for anybody, and I think everybody's gonna start going to integrated planning. Because this idea that, like Jim said, that you're gonna have the sewer separated in 5 years is just crazy. I don't think anybody can afford it anymore. All right?
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Did want to let you know that this is going to be a big piece of what our CIP is. There's 5 years worth of these projects that are on it, but when we look at what our affordability is and what happens with the other projects, this is one of the, we're kind of mandated into this kind of stuff. And this is less than what it could be.
Yeah.
So as we look at what this kind of reprioritizes out of other options that could be out there that we could be doing, there needs to be an understanding that it could be worse.
I apologize for the phone.
It's quite all right. It happens to the best.
I guess I have not a question for you, but just kind of somebody to humor me on what the rate would look like in 2063. Because the unmetered one, July 1, 2023 is 241.72 as a base.
Sewer or water?
Well, if you're looking at 3% a year,
That's all, yeah.
sometimes Bonson 10, it's gonna skyrocket.
There comes a point where there will be an affordability issue that comes into play at some point.
Yeah.
But it's still quite a ways down the road.
Is it though?
EPA's mandated affordability ratio is 2%.
2%, and you're
We're nowhere near that.
nowhere near it.
2% of,
Family,
what?
median family income.
2% of my income to go towards.
2% of your income should go to the sewer bill.
Wow.
Yes.
So they would look at it, and
Tax
we're putting a
Right.
little over 1% right now.
And there, in the state of Iowa, you're in the middle or lower portion. So we had to stay
Our
away
metered
from.
rates, our metered rates.
We had to kind of stay away from there.
so 2% is about, for our area, is about $720 a year?
You know, I was thinking it's about $80 a month that it was gonna be.
Okay.
You guys good? Leah?
She says no.
I appreciate your honesty.
We can move on.
I think nobody's good.
We can move on.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to do the 5-year road plan next. Nick McGregor.
I'm sorry, Nick, all road construction has been canceled. We must now allocate all funds
65.
to.
Well, I've abbreviated the presentation just to not go through the same thing that we've gone through the last couple times. But based on the conversation I brought up at the end of last week, I've redone the plan to meet our financial ability to borrow. If you'd hit the next, oh, I got this thing, don't I? So this is a better map. I helped select the colors so they're more visible. But you can see, you notice the only change really in the roads that were from last time is Summer Street versus Sunnyside. So fiscal year '21 is still central. The section up in North Hill, the asphalt overlay, those two are both mill and fill overlay projects. The last one is the West Avenue and Gear, the Dalbar retrofit that I spoke about because of the bumps between the faulting of the panels, and this would help prolong having to fix that road. So nothing has changed for fiscal year '21. This is central, 653,000, so it's a pretty good section. We just did core samples, I think, last week, and things look pretty good, so we should be able to not have to do a lot of patching. These are the streets in North Hill that will, between this current fiscal year and next fiscal year's projects, we'll tackle all these roads up there. And then West Avenue is, you can see the Dalbar retrofit and what that looks like. They go in there and cut at the seam of the two panels, and they put new Dalbars and pour it, and then a diamond grinding on top of that. And we have spoken with West Burlington because they suffer from some of the same issues from where the West Burlington city lines are north. I don't know how far they would be willing to take it, but the larger project that you bid out, the better price you would get. Fiscal year '22, I did have Washington Street on here. Previously, I removed it because of the borrowing ability and also kind of the construction feasibility of it. But Harrison Street is this project here from Summer Street all the way to Main Street. It would be a full depth reconstruction with concrete, and then it would involve some separation work. This is one of these projects that we started kind of using the concept of integrated planning when we thought about, well, if we're going to redo a roadway, we might as well do the work underneath, because when you do a sewer line, a lot of the cost, I don't know what percentage, Leo might be able to help me on what that cost is, but it's a large portion of what that replacement is. So when we're already planning to do that, we might as well go in and replace the sewer lines. And so this is the schematic that we had worked up, and bring the storm sewer that currently is in the combined system that flows north, shift that and flow it south. This is tentative. We haven't spoken with the school district as far as a property acquisition. I've highlighted it with Mr. Cohen, but that's as far as that conversation has gone. But as is, this is kind of the plan what this project would be. So we've got to get moving on that, and so that's why you see the engineering services on tonight's agenda. And then Washington Street, I didn't move it out of that part of the slideshow, did I? Moved the title but didn't change that panel. Darn it. Fiscal year '23 is Jefferson Street of the Tiger Grant. So no funds of the city are planned to be allocated for that project as of yet. I'm going to get Leo to bring down with the fine-tooth comb on the cost for that project. Madison or 9th Street from Angular Street down to Sunset. The green portion is a concrete full depth reconstruction in that section. The base is pretty poor in those areas, and then the yellow is an asphalt overlay. We did receive STBG grant for that, and that's the controversy of the bike lane and the no parking removal because of the SUDAS standards that you have to meet with those grant dollars. We did get $376,000 out of that year, so our overall obligation is about that $1.5 million. Fiscal year '24, we're looking at several overlay projects, and then I've slipped Washington Street into that conversation. I'm going to jump down to the conversation of Washington because I didn't put that slide into its proper placement. It was originally wrote for an STP at the time grant application. Now they just changed the acronyms. We have $867,000 for an asphalt overlay. We'd like to do more than that because of the brick underneath and kind of the base work that's there. I think we would have a real good opportunity to match what's going on with Jefferson Street and Main Street with the Tiger Grant. And so in discussion with Jim, we'd be using TIF financing to get to that $4.7 million project to be able to fund that. Go ahead.
So this is one that I'm still going to have to work through with Travis on what is really our true fundability on this, but this is what we'd like to shoot for, and it may involve some still discussions as we move forward before we get to this.
Are you talking about matching some of the work that we're doing on the Jefferson Street corridor with Washington in this project?
Correct.
So not all of this is just brick and mortar road. There's a lot of that matching going into this.
Yes, I don't know that we would do all the furnishings and all the
Sure.
things that you're doing on Jefferson Street,
But
I would do.
and some of the design work and aesthetically pleasing those types of projects. So there's
Correct.
a lot of money in that design.
And that's part of it that I may have to force them to cut back out, so.
He already said he found $400,000.
Leah, you can keep coming back. You keep finding that kind of money.
Well, I mean, found in the I should explain that. He gave me an estimate on what Washington Street would be if we were to emulate what we're doing on Jefferson and Main Street up into Washington Street. And there are some things that were able to be reduced out because they didn't need to be there. So, and then I'll click to the next. Oh, I didn't make a slides for those. Agency Street, It was a STBG grant application that we submitted, and we got the full funding that we asked for. It's a full depth reconstruction from where we left off on the last project, just east of Hy-Vee there, all the way to Curran's intersection, so that'll be all concrete. And that's an 80-20 match, so we got quite a bit of money for that. And then Terrace, Johansson, and Hageman are asphalt overlays to bring those back up. Johansson and Terrace are both concrete right now, so there'll probably some patchwork that happens underneath, but they're pretty good candidates for an overlay.
On that agency street, is that gonna go through the similar look and format of new agency with the turn lane?
That's
That's planned.
Complete streets.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I would,
Well,
I should read the application before
Okay.
I answer that, but
all right.
I think it's that way. And then fiscal year '25, if you remember the last conversation, we had Sunnyside in here. Based on the conversation with Jim and Travis, we were not able to afford the $5 million+ project that Sunnyside was to be. Following this conversation is the SCBG grant application. If you remember, when I presented on summer as a PCC, full depth reconstruction, I had an estimate of 1.8 million. Because we're applying for SDBG grant application, you have to follow standards for the roadway width. The current roadway width does not meet the arterial standards needed, so if you were to go after the SDBG grant application, you need to adhere to that. It's also shoulders, so we would have to put storm sewer. So you see that total dollar figure from 1.8 grows to 2.9 million if you're not simply just replacing. It would involve curb and gutter, some storm sewer work. But as you can see in the SDBG grant application, it would be a 50-50 share. So our annual allotment is about 1.5 million, and we would be within that, assuming we were to get the full SDBG ask. Obviously, if we don't get that full request, get a partial, we would have to come back and have a conversation on whether or not we're willing to go down the pathway of doing that project as is, and whether or not we have the financial ability to do that. But I think it's a worthy project. There are many worthy projects out there. You know, Sunnyside is a higher traveled road. It's in like the 5,400 cars per day. Summer is in the 35 to 4,000 cars per day. But, you know, Barrett was on our list. If you've driven Barrett, Barrett's in pretty poor shape. But it
And
doesn't
they-
have as many cars. You know, South Main Street is also on that list. So I could continue cycle if, you know, if these projects as a whole don't make sense, there's more than enough roadways to be put in there for your
Does it
fund.
have any significant bearing that there's two schools on Sunnyside? I mean, would that help us possibly get the grant money? I don't know.
It would, but even if you were to get the full SCBG availability, you're still only talking in that 1.2 to 1.4 million. The city's financial obligation would still be in the
Still would be
2.5 to 3 million
Sure.
bracket. So, and when we estimate early on, you examine the width of the roadway and understand what your replacement costs have been for similar type roadways, and you just kind of square yard it and come up with what that estimate is. But, you know, like the Summer Street project, until you start looking into the details of what that engineering is gonna entail, you don't get to a very accurate estimate, and then they are just estimates at that. So it's kind of tough to, you know,
Project out,
throw a
yeah.
dart at a dartboard and, you know, hope that you're close.
And Nick, you had mentioned that, you know, with the sewer separation projects, if we're tearing up a street with the purpose of separating the sewer, we're also fixing or replacing the street as well. And you just mentioned that when we're gonna tear up a street for the purpose of replacing the street, if we need to separate the sewer, we'll take care of it as well. So we're kind of, you know, taking two different approaches but getting the same result. Do any of those other streets that you just mentioned that aren't in the CIP, are any of those streets slated for any sewer separation work where perhaps the improvements could come from that side?
So, of the projects that I have listed, there are still, so Hageman would be an example of an area that is is in an unseparated part of the community that would need to be separated. However, in any of the integrated plan or the sewer master plan, the plan to separate that area isn't for a while. I don't know what that time frame looks like, but an asphalt overlay's lifespan is in the 10 to 15 year bracket before you need to do anything. So I wouldn't be hesitating. If you're gonna go in and do full depth concrete, the lifespan on that's more like 40 to 50 years. And so I think that's the value, is if you're doing full depth, especially you're ripping up all the surface and then going down in, and then that's where you struggle. But an overlay on Hageman, I don't think you need to be worried about that. As you go through some of the others, Madison or 9th Street does abut against a lot of needing to be, it's throughout the whole corridor of needing to be separated area. The areas where we are doing full depth reconstruction is right next to the Locust Street project right now, especially right around Grimes School, that we're currently in the process of getting that separated. We aren't, the road plan to do 9th wasn't part of that. There'll be some patches that you'll see, but we'll come back in and do that. Washington Street is already has already been separated, and Main Street, I guess, is the other one that Leo had brought up. That is one area that we're going to go in and do this work to look at doing sewer separation in that area. But I don't. This is one of the key ones that brought the conversation, but I don't think there's not any others.
And even one of the things that drove it for you on Harrison was you were doing a straight overlay, and then as you got into some of the road conditions, you found you were doing full depth and if you're going to have to do full depth replacement, seemed like that kind of drove your conversation on the sewer separation.
Correct. Yeah.
Makes sense. You guys good?
So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. 2024, we've been telling our citizens that we could start looking at Cascade. I know we don't have the G7 report back, so what happens to that project? Whether we'd have to decide whether we're rebuilding it or demoing it without a rebuild, but it's not in there because we don't have the results back from the report. Is that correct?
Correct. And count. I don't know. Was there a decision made on demolition of the bridge or no?
Well, the council voted to demo it in May, but the study is part of
Correct.
Making a reevaluation.
And so I think
on
the
that.
difficulty is waiting on what the public engagement of Impact 7G's work is. And I didn't include it in there. One, I don't know what a true estimate really is. From a shotgun approach on, well, is it a $4 to $6 million bridge? Or if the input from this engagement is we want to rehab it, and that's what city council decides to do, that could be $8 to $12 million. I don't know where that's
Well,
at, and so.
It could be the engagement, but also say, hey, we've done without it for 10 years, just demo it for safety reasons and leave it, put a scenic overlook,
Or
that
just
could
put
be.
in a pedestrian path.
Yeah,
or
I don't
something.
know, but I just wanted to get it out there because last time we were questioned publicly about why we weren't discussing it. It's because we're still waiting on the 7G report.
The other thing is am I wrong to see the 5-year road plan for me is the traditional style of road? When I look at CIP projects, that's where I would take into consideration the larger project like a bridge. I mean, it is part of a road, but I think for me personally, a bridge is kind of a separate project versus talking about an overlay on Hageman.
Mount
Yeah.
Pleasant Street Bridge. Was
Mount
part of
Pleasant
it.
Street Bridge was in the 5-year
Was it?
road plan.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It was also an open functioning bridge at the time
Sure.
of when it was replaced. So it was
Right.
part of the current network. Not that Cascade isn't, but it's just a closed part of that network.
One of the things that will happen as you go to have a discussion of this, I mean, we're gonna be cutting back on the costs on some of these projects just to try to get to where we maintain level debt payments on the projects that we take on, and get it, don't violate our 70% debt capacity and some of these other things. When you go to have a discussion of Cascade Bridge, if you're talking about a $5 million project or an $8 million project, you're most likely talking about which of these others are you gonna kick out and not do? Are you gonna, as a result of this, not do Agency Street? Are you gonna decide not to do Summer Street. I mean, you're gonna be kicking projects off.
I understand that.
So, and that'll come when you, after you get the numbers back
I
from
just
Impact
want to get
17.
that out there so people know we are discussing it, so.
And you had made the point a couple weeks ago that there's the potential, and I say that very loosely, but potential for us to reapply for grants such as the new version of the Tiger Grant in order and try and include the Cascade Corridor with that specific project in mind after we complete the existing Tiger project.
Correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
the new build.
And to me, that's the direction that makes more sense when we talk about that specific project.
And that would be using the true idea of integrated planning, because we already need to do something with the Mississippi River Interceptor.
Right.
That currently goes down into the Mississippi, and we need to bring that up to Main Street, and then bring the flow down the hill. And so you'd be replacing the roadway.
Yeah.
I think full encompass, it makes a lot of sense. You could leverage your sewer money that you're spending on the interceptor to help with the bridge and build grant
And
and
I
whatnot.
may not even be on the council when this comes up, when or if it comes up in 2024, 2025, or whenever. But for me, none of the projects you've talked about, Agency, Summer Street, Sunnyside, would take a backseat to Cascade Bridge. And I know there's a lot of people who aren't going to like to hear that, but we're talking about main collector corridors in our community that have to be functioning. Now, there may be other projects, but we're talking about projects that are 1/10 of the scope or 1/10 of the overall cost of the bridge. So even if we eliminated those projects, we wouldn't be making much of a dent in our ability to fund Cascade Bridge.
Yeah, and I guess part of it is you're not doing those streets, but you're likely delaying them a couple of years.
Right.
And you delay everything.
Yeah, everything else out
Yeah,
there.
won't be a first, though. We've had to switch some things around. It's just part of the nature of the beast. You guys satisfied? or-
So upon that, I will bring a resolution action item for the next meeting that will have a packet of what those roads are in the fiscal year with their estimate value on that, and then any grant funding that's associated. And I'll have that for council approval for next week, along with the SCBG grant application, which I guess still I'm supposed to talk about.
For summer.
For Summer Street.
Yep.
You guys good?
Yep.
Yes.
Good.
Since you're up there, you might as well go ahead and do the STBG.
Actually, if you don't mind, Mayor, can we jump to the last one? I only got about 10 minutes left.
Okay, and we'll call you back up. Peanut butter left, but, okay, we're just gonna address, city council salary. I'll start that one again. I still think this is something that needs to be addressed. The reason why I feel like it's, I like the way it was brought up is it's something that won't be addressed right away, so it's not self-serving for anybody. To me, I didn't feel like it was a matter of, should we, it was just a matter of getting the figures right, but, if I'm wrong on that, and you guys feel like, that the numbers are fine, then let's hear about it. I think it'd be a waste of an opportunity to take care of something that's needed to be handled a long time ago. The city council members put at least 25 hours per week at a bare minimum. That comes down to way less than minimum wage. Somebody said, well, you can make up things with your time. When I said about city council being expensive, especially the mayor position, all the way around. And they said, well, yeah, there's things that you have to cut out, time is money. It's not what I was referencing. I was referencing gas, and every time you have to go and meet somebody for coffee or breakfast or lunch or dinner, which you do that a lot. That's how people talk, and you don't go to their houses. Nobody can buy your stuff. You always have to pay for that. Anything that the council needs, have to pay for. Any activities, if there's something going on, people selling tickets and stuff like that. Well, as a council member, you try to support the city and you buy things. It's just an expensive job, and I don't think you can compare it to, somebody brought it up, well, what about the school board? I don't think you compare the school board to the city council, and I'm not saying that they don't work hard by any means. I just think that they represent the school, the council represents the entire city of Burlington. And a lot of times, the questions that I get, or emails, or even phone calls or texts, a lot of times they're not even from people that live in Burlington, but you still have to take the time out and still address it and deal with it. I don't think it's worth I'm not gonna throw a tantrum either way. I'm on my way out. I just feel like for the next people that are coming behind us, I feel like we're doing them a disservice for those that have had experience and know what it takes to be on this council and how expensive it is. Everybody's gotten raises throughout the city, except for the city council. I feel like that's an injustice, so that's why I brought it. And I waited till the last minute so that nobody would say, well, Shane's doing that because he's the mayor and he wants more money. No, mayor's leaving. Mayor's leaving, so I'm not doing that for me, but for the people that come behind. And even if somebody says, well, somebody said, well, you're just doing that so you can run again and make more money. Just because even if somebody decided to run, there's no guarantee they're gonna get elected. People still have to elect them. And if somebody on this council re-ran and got that money, if they got elected, that's a citizen saying, hey, they're worthy of whatever the pay is. So, all right, I'm done with that. I'm open for comments, council.
I think I made this suggestion a couple of weeks ago. You had talked about doubling it. That's not something that I would be comfortable supporting. I was just trying to remember my numbers, but I think it was not doubling it, but cutting that in half. So we would increase council salaries to 9,000, and then increase the mayor position to 10. But I think one thing that's important is this takes effect after a re-election. I can't vote for a raise for myself.
I agree. I'm not even comfortable talking about it, to be honest with you.
And I
But
think it makes sense to put a 3%, or not 3%, I'm sorry. The only way that it increases is the council would get the same increase that city employees get, not, no more, no less. And then that way, over time, that pay should expectedly keep up with inflation and things like that. And the only reason I make that suggestion is because one of the points that was made a couple weeks ago is the amount of time it takes to do this and do it correct. There's an opportunity cost, and there's a lot of people in the community that can't serve because of those costs. So by increasing it, we are hopefully replacing some of that lost income and opening the door for other people in the community who would not previously been able to serve, to have the ability to serve. So that's my reasoning for supporting it. I think it's a good idea. You know, I don't know that I've ever served with anybody up here that does this for the money, but I would like to have the opportunity to see other people want to throw their hat in the ring and want to sit up here. So I think that if we can, like I said, eliminate some of those costs that they would have, that we could see that.
And the only thing I want to add is, I agree with you on the numbers that were thrown out. Those were numbers that were thrown out to me, and after I've had time to think about them, I was still satisfied with them, but I still think you got to crawl before you run. And I think crawling is more like, I was around 9 city council. To me, I thought 11.5. I was at 12. I'm not even 11.5. I was at 12 for the mayor. The mayor just runs too much. I just feel like when I brought this up, I don't want to keep beating this up, but when somebody came to me, they said, well, yeah, we know it costs money, time is money. No, it costs literal money. You know, there's months that the city, that the mayor had to spend more money than out of my own pocket from what I received from the city for doing the job. And to me, that's an in-service. That's an injustice.
One of the things that concerns me is that, you know, when we three came in, the newbies, we had 14 candidates. And it wasn't until midway through the debates that one of the candidates said to me, wait a minute, we get what? Because they thought there would be a little more compensation. And they were an hourly employee. And so every hour that they took off the job, they were going to have to sacrifice their income to serve the city. And, you know, you're right. No one takes this job to make the money, but they shouldn't have to make money. But they shouldn't have to pay necessarily, or make a sacrifice for it. I'm okay with the numbers that you're throwing out there, as long as it's for future elections. Tied to it is fine. You know, but it is, you know, what I said earlier, you know, I didn't even like discussing a raise with my old man when I worked for my family business for 37 years. I sure as heck don't want to ask the citizens of Burlington. But I do think it needs to be in place, because in my 2 years on this, I've been surprised exactly how many hours it does take. I mean, it takes a lot during budget season, expected that. But during the slow weeks, by the time you answer email, if you try to be accessible and you try to answer emails, texts, phone calls, those type of things, it does, the time does wear out and or add up, and you can see where it wears out a person.
Yeah.
And so more importantly though, I don't want to lose the opportunity for talented people to come forward and serve our city because they're looking at what it might cost them. That's plan one for me. Because this time we had 2 or 3 good candidates for 2 open spots, and I was really encouraged when I ran that there was 14. I don't recall a time when there was that many candidates, and I'd like to see that on a regular basis. We have two seats, maybe there should be 8 or 9, but the only way we're gonna encourage that is, one, we gotta stop talking about how much time it takes, and then 2, we gotta at least be fair. It should be above minimum wage, so that's my 2 cents.
Any input, one?
Yeah, and I don't think it's fair to say that you don't want to talk about it or discuss it or even, bring it up. Just because if the council sitting here doesn't do it, it is never going to get done
I know.
because it can't take effect.
And that's
It's
exactly
like-
why I think we should have the increase with the city staff. That way we don't have to worry.
Right,
about
it
that.
doesn't have to
Never
become an
have to
issue
bring it up
again. I know nothing can actually happen until
First next year.
February?
No, after the next election.
After next
It wouldn't go
election.
into place until after the next
Right,
election.
but it could be discussed
Implement.
Yeah, you
and
can-
voted
yeah.
on and
You can be starting that in January.
in January. I think it's important that you guys agree or are comfortable with having it on some sort of date in the future when it's possible for them to do it, to actually start that real discussion. And I think I would like to see that happen before the end of, my term, because it is important, because of all the reasons you all have said and other people have said.
I hear what everyone is saying, and I can't wrap my brain around it because we're looking at a budgetary deficit. So in all honesty, I'm gonna have a really hard time voting for an increase when we can't make budget. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think historically, people got involved in city politics because it was their civic duty. They wanted to learn, they wanted to grow, they were passionate about it, and I think we're starting to get off of why it's important. We're starting to get sidetracked and look at monetary compensation, and I'm just having a hard time getting my head wrapped around that.
I understand that, Linda, but one thing I'd say is if you look at that wall over there.
I was just
the
gonna say.
Largest percentage of people standing in those
White
photos
males.
are traditionally retired,
Mm-hmm.
which means that they have a lot more time on their hands. Not until some of those more recent photos do you see anybody that is a larger pool of sitting city councilmen that are full-time, non-exempt employees of others, or starting small businesses or running small businesses, where the time that they take off for this is something that they're not reimbursed for. So I would like to think that in the future, this council is gonna continue to be diverse. I think if you looked at the wall right now, this is probably the most diverse group that's sat
Well,
up
if you
here.
felt so passionate, how come you're not gonna vote for it then? I hear you're arguing for it and you don't want to vote for it.
No, I'm gonna vote for it.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you were not.
Oh, no, I plan to support this. And the reason is, as I say right now, we've got 2 women, we have an African-American male, we've got somebody, I like to think that I'm in the younger generation, maybe if I look around the room, I better be careful how I say that, but.
So you're gonna say, and you
You're the
didn't say
token.
we got the old.
My point is, we've got a pretty diverse group, and I'd like to think that we're gonna be able to keep it that way moving forward. And I think the only way we can do that is to allow people the opportunity to feel comfortable doing it.
And let me address your point. I don't think it's about wage. Wage went out the door when anybody got a check at all. You know, it's either you're not getting anything or you're getting something. Now we're just figuring out the something. You're already getting paid. Everybody that's served on council has gotten money. So it's not about, well, paid for doing something. It's about, is the compensation, does it need to be adjusted? Because everybody's already getting paid. So, I mean, I don't think that's an argument.
One thing I will say, Mayor, is you brought up the point of the mayor making more. I did look up as many communities that I could around us in communities our size. And the one thing that was fairly consistent was the mayor made between $1,000 and $1,500 more than the council did. So I don't know that I'd be comfortable supporting that large,
Wow.
significant more of an increase for.
I disagree with
For
that, but I mean.
non-full-time mayor, I mean, for
Yeah. Yeah,
city manager run size.
right on, right on. Yeah, I'll publicly disagree with that. I just think the mayor just has to go do too much. He's the front man. And to go through that, or front lady, but to go through that, you know, I'll be reading all week this week, and I'll be reading all week next week. You know, that doesn't come with little extra things. You know, nobody's gonna pay for my laundry when I get snot on my pants. You know, it is. And to me, it's no complaint. That's what the mayor should do. The mayor should be out there reading and doing these things, but the mayor does a whole lot more than what the council does, as far as events, and you guys know that. You guys know that. So I just don't think the 1,000's gonna cover it on the laundry bill. But I am glad to see, I'm just glad to see that you guys are addressing it, and at least doing a compensation adjustment. And if you guys are comfortable with the 1,000 or the 1,500, then God bless you. God bless you. Just at least give the mayor something. So, you're out? Okay. I really wish you'd reconsider that, because this isn't about you, Linda. This has nothing to do with you. You won't get
But
a
the
dollar.
media, thank you, Leah Anderson, will make it about me.
You know, I'll tell you what, the media's been busting me up for 8 years. You just can't go off of that. You have to, we have to, again, and sometimes you gotta take some lumps for other people, but I would encourage you do what you want, but I would encourage you, you know, this isn't about you. This is about future council members, so, let it come out as it does. John, anything to say last minute?
I'm in.
You're in? I'm in. Tuan?
Yeah, of
I
course.
don't know that this is something that can come up we can't vote on this until January, right?
No.
No, but it can be put on
Okay.
If you put
a
it on,
future note.
if you're
that
putting it on
you
the
can-
next agenda, the next time that you would have an ordinance to be considered would be the first meeting in January.
Okay. I'm comfortable supporting, with the numbers that I presented.
I agree.
I couldn't
What's-
support anything.
What
significant.
form did, 9,000 or
9 and 10,
Seven-
50,
that's
9,
$750 a month?
I said 9,000 and 10,000 is what I proposed.
That's fine.
And then the stipulation that it'd be increased annually based off of city
Or
staff.
frozen. Frozen if the city staff's frozen.
Yeah, if they
we're
don't
frozen.
get an increase, we should
Yeah.
get an increase.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
I'll have to check with Patrick on
How to set that
the-
language up, yeah.
Yeah.
what can be done
I would
with
say
that.
whatever the mean is.
Okay, you got a bolt, or you got?
I do. I have a Christmas concert in just a little bit,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'll listen to the rest of this in the thing. So
What age?
I have an 8 and a 6-year-old going up tonight, so there are some things that can't be missed.
fun.
All right, you
Tomorrow
guys
for
have a good
me.
night.
Everybody else didn't get the memo. Me and Matt wore our flags tonight. You
I
guys-
see
You guys
that.
did, so,
I
yeah,
did not.
okay. You didn't notice that, but anyways.
Yeah, it's good.
I know, I like that.
It's the emblem on the front that's a problem.
He's got concert too.
He's gotta go
All right.
support the concert.
Have fun, Principal. Okay, let's go back to,
SB.
let's go to,
Are you wanna
Yeah.
finish the discussion on it?
yeah,
We'll
right
go through
on.
the rest?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Mr. McGregor, you want to come back up and,
While it's fresh.
while it's fresh, we don't want it to get stale.
I think I highlighted most of the conversation in my previous conversation, but just to talk about what that grant application will read. I don't know that you should have it done by next week, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it was a short duration to try and get that put together. But the project that we would like to submit, or that we will be submitting, is Summer Street from Harrison down to Kestner. It'll involve full-depth concrete It'll be a little bit of a widening of the project with curb and gutter and some storm sewer. The estimate is about $2.9 million, of which we will go after a 50-50 match for SDBG grant to cover that. A lot of the intersection of Harrison and Summer will be tackled with the Harrison Street project in 2 years, so we won't have to get into the intersection. But I can answer anything else on that actual application.
I'm good. Twan? Peanut butter? Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Somebody go hit that guy in the back.
Is he okay?
All right, I'll wait till he gets back in. We'll do budget calendar next. Let's do, public hearing number 4. Public hearing for consideration of a general obligation loan agreement at principal amount not to exceed $4,855,000.
This would be a follow-up on Travis's presentation a couple of weeks ago. We're, in this next budget year, we're gonna go over the 10 million, or would have been going over the 10 million bank qualified cap for borrowing when the water department went to do their $4 million estimated project. Given that, knowing that we're gonna be exceeding and none of the funding would have been bank qualified, he was looking to borrow as much as we could in this year to keep us under next year's cap as well. The 4.855 is designed to keep us under our 10 million cap for this year. He is in the process of gaining quotes from local banks and anticipate, we don't have any results back on that, but would anticipate having results back on what the best option is here for pursuing this. This is again looking to do a borrowing and kind of almost like an advanced borrowing, where we wouldn't have to necessarily, well, one of the structures was doing a full drawdown and then investing the proceeds. I think the others are more of a borrowing but not necessarily doing a full drawdown. Because we're not looking to incur a lot of costs with this, but to try to just make sure that we get the best. I mean, it makes a significant difference when we do the long-term placement we would be looking to do this next spring. It makes a significant difference in what our borrowing costs will be on that long-term placement by doing the advance funding now. I know that confuses it, and I would be better off leaving it to
You
Travis.
explained it better the last time, but.
No, Travis explained it
Travis
last time,
explained-
so that's why
right,
it's
it was
better.
Travis that explained it right. Is everybody good?
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, we're good, makes sense. Let's do number 5, public hearing, consideration of an ordinance rezoning the property located at 313 North Roosevelt Avenue, Zone C2 General Commercial, to also include R4 multifamily residential in a planned unit development overlay zone as allowed by the zoning code of the city of Burlington, Iowa. It's gonna be the first reading on that one, Mr. McGregor, Mr. Tisdale.
This is a request by the owner of the former Shopco property to rezone to include a PUD in R4 zoning, looking to allow the back portion or western portion, the existing Shopco or former Shopco building to be R4, and then maintaining commercial frontage along Roosevelt. So this eastern box would remain C2 general commercial, while this would, they're looking to rezone to R4. Doing a PUD, which would have a landscape buffer in between the two properties, also require a pedestrian pathway from the R4 zone to the intersection of Roosevelt and Market Street, address some signage and some architectural design guidelines as well. This did go to the Planning Commission November 19th. They voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning to the council based on the request and plans of the property owner, adaptive reuse of the existing large box building, maintaining the commercial frontage along Roosevelt, and the similar redevelopment of land use on the east side of Roosevelt. Kind of followed the pattern on the Burlington Crossing subdivision, where they have residential's allowed in the southeast corner of that development. Hasn't developed to date, but the primary area is C2 within that residential there. This is a much smaller scale, and they're looking to kind of redevelop and reuse that former Shopko building that we know are sometimes difficult to redevelop. This is the preliminary site plan for the site of how it could look. The R4 would be the building. You can kind of see some of the outline of units in there, looking at parking access into the interior of the property off of the northern area with the opportunity for some commercial along Roosevelt, possibly subdividing into 3 separate lots there. And then preliminary rendering as well of the front side of the building here with a drop-off and canopy, and then showing some of the units on that side. Mark Fisher with Myers Construction's representative for the owner of the property, who's out of California, and here to answer any questions as well, or
Fish.
if you have any details.
Come on down. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have any other expertise to offer?
The goal of this is, as Eric explained, is to get adaptive reuse, a senior housing community, trying to meet some of the needs of Burlington. We've been working with the city and planning, and also having numerous town hall meetings to actually address the public and find out what their needs and desires are for community style living. We know that's a segment of our population that's growing. The affordability issue for seniors, maybe they live in a 2-story house right now, they can't actually afford, or there is no opportunity for them to go anywhere else. So that's one of the goals of this project, is actually to give them a place to go where they can age in place, and it's fully adaptable to their needs.
I can't really read on the map. Does that say 42 one and 2 bedroom units in the building?
42, yes, correct. That, we're working on a number of different plans. And, we come up with different ideas, present them to the public, see what the response is to different size units. So right now, we're looking at probably a project in the end that will be between 40 and maybe as many as 50 units if we find a market for that. So we're still exploring all those sorts of issues. Unit sizes would go from the smallest one we're exploring right now is as small as 600 square feet, all the way up to potentially a 1,900 square foot unit with a loft. So we're looking at just about everything we can. One thing I did want to mention is, as we look into these higher densities and the unit size obviously goes down, we were wondering if the council would be amenable to modifying the PUD language and changing the parking requirements for smaller units. So in other words, a unit like 600 square feet maybe would only be required to have 1 off-street parking space. Currently, the code says 2 off-street parking spaces, and if you're an efficiency unit, then you could be 1.5 parking spaces. The nature of the market here doesn't really lend itself to efficiency style units, so we'd always have a separate bedroom for the resident. So, that's one thing that we'd like to have the council consider, is if maybe we could modify that. I don't know what the procedure would be, should I make some suggestions on changes to the language or additions to the language?
I see a lot of green space in now, so if we modified the parking lot so there's less parking spots, would the green space just be enhanced? Is that what would happen?
If the unit count stays at 42, yeah. But actually, at the 42 that you see there would only be 3 or 4 units that would fit that smaller criteria where the residents probably won't require their own space and an off or a guest space. So it's one of those tools we're looking at using to potentially get the unit count up to maybe 44 or 45. Because then obviously we'd need more parking, and rather than needing an additional 10 spaces, we'd like to get that down to 5 or 7 or something like that.
At this point, are there any plans for amenities inside, hair salon, billiards, food?
Yes, we're looking at doing community rooms, over on the right-hand side of that. That would be shared for not only salons, but also potentially visiting doctors, dentists, things like that. So the owner and developers is exploring all those sorts of things.
They could go here too.
He said, is there enough square footage in there for middle-aged balding men?
I was gonna ask,
His mic wasn't working. His mic wasn't working.
Well, the middle-aged part might present a little bit of a problem, but the balding, we're all for that.
Alrighty.
Clock is ticking, brother. I'm getting older every day.
Yeah, the development is targeted for 55 and older, so.
All right.
Qualify that.
Well, I hope that
it's gonna be
works out.
roommates?
Anyway, no, hopefully it comes off. I do like the proposal. It is hard to use a big building, big box building like that, so.
Yeah.
My concern would be, as far as the parking, we would have to defer to
Tisdale?
We'd probably recommend a maximum number of units, but one space for 600 square foot units with a cap of 10 of those or something would be, or whatever. I guess we'd have to have that discussion, but we could see that as long as there's adequate for visitors and other people there. And I think that 2 per unit would provide that.
Okay.
So we could get some language together and bring that to council as an amendment.
Don't
Since it
want
didn't
park-
go through planning commission, wanted to have that
We
discussion.
don't want them parking in the yard.
Yeah.
No parking in the yard.
Yeah, I think it's great that we can use buildings, like that one it would likely have been empty for quite some time.
Big white elephant,
Yeah.
literally, so,
I
yeah.
Yeah, so I wish we could do that with more buildings, but I suppose that building's new enough that it can be done a little bit easier than, say, something downtown. So,
Well, that would be a wonderful thing too, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, early on in this process, the developer did look at, hey,
else
can we do a
was,
swap here? To do something downtown. It's, but.
yeah.
Still, it's always good to see somebody making moves and trying to get something developed here in Burlington, so
Yeah.
we're excited about that.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming down, appreciate you. Okay, let's go to the consent agenda. We'll wrap that up real quick. Number 1, resolution approving nuisance abatements for various properties. Satisfied?
Yeah, it is a concern though, seeing the same names on there all the time.
Yeah.
Just gonna say.
Some people, you can pile in on them and they just, they don't learn. But yeah, keep doing what you do. Nuisance. Number 2, resolution approving an agreement with Stanley Consultants for engineering services related to reconstruction of Harrison Avenue. Mr. McGregor.
In front of you is a resolution to approve the contract with Stanley Consultants. For this contract, we went out and did an RFP, request for proposal, so we received 5, where we were able to see the qualifications, some of the past projects, and also the price for the services rendered. Staff has decided to go with Stanley, or is our recommendation to use Stanley. Their proposal cost to do the design for the estimated $4.5 to $5 million project is $372,700. There's quite a bit of design when you think about some of the separation work. The roadway design isn't overly elaborate, but there's going to need to be some assistance when it comes to getting the proper easements and the right-of-way to bring the storm line to its future retention pond, and then the design for that retention pond. So Stanley has quite a bit of history doing some of this work. There was several other firms that had just as good of qualifications. Price was a factor when selecting it. It wasn't the ultimate factor. in selecting it, but we feel pretty confident in selecting Stanley. We've used them for a couple of things, namely Mount Pleasant Street Bridge, and we had good service with them. So,
Questions for Nick?
No.
We're satisfied? Thank you. Number 3 is a resolution approving engagement letter with Piper Jaffray for 2019 D-financing. James?
This goes with that loan agreement, having them engaged to provide those services. And then we'll be moving, the next item there is the 220 borrowing, or 2020 borrowing. We'll probably be doing that borrowing in March, and it'll be sort of a follow-up to what this borrowing amount is. So just engaging their services for that. They've been our longstanding partner in this process, and each time we add an issue, we go through this process of doing an engagement letter on a new borrowing.
That's right. Jim, after you've asked her twice to marry you and she still hasn't agreed, you should just walk away from the engagement. All right, council. It sounds so much better in my head. But anyways.
That's why you're single.
You're not out of order, but I still want to just hammer that down, so. You know, if that was new information, I'd act surprised, but I've heard it before, my friend. I've heard it before. All right. Are we satisfied?
Are you bleeding?
No.
Planned it so hard, yes.
No, I'm not bleeding, man. There's already salt covering that cut. Let's finish her out here. Number 1 is a budget calendar. James?
Actually,
Steph?
well, I don't know that we need a whole lot outside of just letting you see the schedule of what we have for meetings.
Me and you're good with
It
it.
gives you a time.
Yeah.
It gives
Seems
you a good
appropriate.
time frame for, we don't have to have everything approved until March 30th, but we have to go through 2 public hearings this time. To make the timeframes work for 2 public hearings with the notice proceedings, we really have to be in a spot where we have the budget finalized. I haven't looked at the sheet. Is it like
January
30th? 31st.
Yeah.
It's tight when you go through this process with the public hearings. There is probably a tad bit of wiggle room, but not by a whole lot in that. So,
Council, you guys satisfied?
Yeah, that's what we proposed earlier,
The-
right?
yep, all the Thursdays.
Yeah.
We have, if you look through there, the schedule's beginning January
Yeah.
9th, and
Yep.
all the departments will be done presenting Monday, the 27th. It provides the 30th for any overflow from Public Works or any other department that might not have gotten complete, and then for you to have any discussions about how you want to move forward at that point.
Guys good?
Yep.
Anything else, James?
No, if you look on there, we have to have 2 public hearings this time. The one is, the first one that we have to have is new. Now for asking for new property tax dollars, any over what you had the previous year, you need to have a public hearing held to address that, to discuss why you're asking for more than the previous year. Provide reasons for that and vote for approval on that to be part of the process. But you have to know what you're asking for before you get to that stage.
Why
You
is
can't-
that? What's that for?
Just a new rule that went through the state legislature this
Okay.
last year. And a lot of that just has to, they want to make sure that the public is well informed on
Right.
as changes occur with how property tax askings occur.
Nothing wrong
So
with
that's if we ask for an increase
Only if, right.
Of any dollar
of
amount.
any dollar.
So if it's
Yep.
$1, it's got to go down that way.
Correct.
Right on, okay. Okay. Closing remarks, Tisdale. Okay, peanut butter.
This Thursday, downtown, Living Windows, it's gonna be a good time. So food and festives and cocoa and free kittens for sale and puppies and all kinds of shopping extravaganza.
Selling kittens
And I went
and
to
stuff.
Holiday Shop Hop last Thursday and bought a wreath, and it's just it's a fun festive element. The stores are all lit up. It's just a really good time. So check it out.
Counselor?
I don't have anything at this point in time.
MPT?
Nothing tonight.
Okay.
What about you?
He's
got-
got nothing, he's
got
getting up
nothing.
and walking out on me.
Nick's le- come back, Nick, come back, okay. Nick Mack, you got
What is
anything on
this?
before you head out? Okay,
Oh, Christmas concert.
Sing loud.
a Christmas concert, all right. James?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for putting up with us tonight.
Thank you.
One more week of me, and you guys will be done.
And Annie. Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah, but they like you.
They like me.
Wednesday,
We're still
you guys,
on.
council talk?
What's that?
Council talk? Radio,
Yes.
yes.
Annie?
Wednesday, council talk?
Next
9
Wednesday or
o'clock?
this Wednesday?
This
Holy
Wednesday.
guacamole.
It's the farewell.
At what time?
9 in the morning.
And then we immediately go to tea?
And then tea. Go to tea.
Oh, that's right, yeah, and then immediately go into tea.
I guess I'll be
Yes.
taking Wednesday off.
I've got to get